welcome to our training topic today, building personal well-being. My name is Kira McGillivray, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and the Chief Program Officer of School-Based Initiatives at Children and Families First, which is a nonprofit in the state of Delaware. And I'm here with Shannon, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Fish. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the Director of Operations and Risk Management for Children and Families First. And together, Kiera and I are the co-directors of the Brain Science Training Institute.
The Brain Science Training Institute is a training program for organizations and the community on trauma, brain science, and the impact on individuals and communities. For more information, please scan the QR code on the screen and it'll take you to our website. So we have a couple of objectives today, which is to identify the benefits of a growth mindset and resilience, and then to kind of learn a framework to be able to increase our own personal well-being in ourselves and in others. So we are going to start today by looking at our brain and the architecture of our brain and how it's developed and what happens to our brain when we experience stress. And so in very general terms, we have what's called our downstairs brain and our upstairs brain. Our downstairs brain is our emotional brain. It's our oldest, most primitive part of our brain. And it houses our brainstem, which is in charge of our most basic functions: breathing, heart rate, reproduction, digestion, blinking, everything happening at an unconscious level. It also houses our limbic region, which is in charge of our very strong emotions like fear and anger and love. And then also within our limbic region is something called our amygdala. And our amygdala is our brain's alarm system. It alerts us to potentially life-threatening situations around us. And then we have our upstairs brain, which is our rational, logical, decision-making brain. It is what separates us from other animals. And it is what gives us the ability to have empathy and compassion, to self-reflect, to look at things that we've done in the past and think about how we're going to handle situations in the future. And another piece of our upstairs brain is something called our medial prefrontal cortex, which we're going to also call the watchtower. And it has many roles, but one of those is that it actually helps to regulate the downstairs brain. So we're going to kind of give an example of what this looks like all together. So when our amygdala sounds the alarm, it actually hijacks the upstairs brain or blocks connections to the upstairs brain. And it does this so that we don't kind of weigh the pros and cons in a stressful situation. So if a bear's right in front of us, we're not going to write a list of whether or not we should run or kind of hide from the bear. Our brain is going to block connections to the upstairs brain so that we can react as efficiently and quickly as possible so that we can survive this potentially life-threatening event. So what does this look like in real life? I'm going to kind of assume that you have been driving before or been in a car before, and you have had that almost experience of being in a car accident. Now, a car accident did not happen. You just almost got into one. Someone swerved into your lane or they ran a red light. And what you might have noticed is that you tightened up on the steering wheel, your heart started pounding really quickly, your body started making all these internal adjustments to that external stimuli of what was about to happen. But there was no car accident. So you don't stay like this the whole rest of the day, just heart pumping and eyes wide and ready to go. What happens is that medial prefrontal cortex, or that watchtower, says, whoa, amygdala, everything's fine. You can go about your day. And you don't think about it again until I ask you right now to kind of think about it. So why this is important when we are talking about building your own personal resilience is that we want to be in this upstairs brain, rational, logical, decision-making area. And we want to be able to help regulate ourselves and soothe ourselves when we do come over these stressful situations. We want that medial prefrontal cortex or watchtower to be online and to help soothe that downstairs brain. And this is important because when we come from our downstairs brain, we are coming from that emotional part. And so it might actually impact our interactions with our colleagues, with our families, and with our patients. So let's take a look at what those upstairs brain skills are more. We call these executive functioning skills. Those are held up in our upstairs brain. And these are really what society expects us to have in the workplace and in our life. As Shannon will sometimes say, it's that adulting piece that we want to practice. And so this ranges from everything from impulse control to emotional regulation and flexible thinking, having social skills, planning, prioritizing, comprehension, and organization. And when we're able to do all of these things successfully, we are functioning quite well and appropriately within our society or within the workplace. And so we can see how important it is for us to stay in that regulated state in our upstairs brain. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. Resilience is this ability to adapt well in the face of adversity or significant stressors. So it's the ability to kind of stay in that upstairs brain and practice those executive functioning skills, even when stress is occurring. So resiliency is this skill. It's not just a trait that we're born with. It is a skill that we can practice and utilize to regulate ourselves and be able to kind of work from an upstairs brain mindset. Some people call resilience the ability to bounce back. Others I think of it as a way to kind of move through stress. We don't necessarily bounce back from stress. We've got to be able to move through it in a way that we come out on the other side. And in order to do that, we need those executive functioning skills. So here are some kind of resilient strategies that we want to focus on. The first is connection. We know that having strong, trusting relationships with individuals around us really helps us to be more resilient when stressors occur. It's what really separates a stressor from becoming this toxic, significant stress that takes a toll on our body to what we call a more tolerable stressor, where, yes, it might be stressful. We might get some increases in adrenaline and cortisol and all those stress hormones. But because we have connections and supportive people around us, we're able to kind of move through that stressor. So we want to make sure that we have nurturing relationships and social connections. This can be with family members, friends, colleagues, but also community. And then we want to think about, how do we build our capacity to cope? Because stress is going to happen. There's no way around it. And we have positive stress, yes, but we are bound to experience some stressors that are likely to take a toll on us. And so how do we cope through it and move through it? And so we do this through what we call self-regulation and soothing skills. So having practices that help us remain non-anxious in situations, ways to kind of soothe our body and our mind. Common techniques are diaphragmatic breathing, for example, or mindfulness. And then we want to make sure that we have appropriate communication skills, that we're able to communicate our emotions and our thoughts and feelings effectively to those that are around us. And then lastly, we want to be able to manage those emotions. We can't communicate if we can't manage and understand what we are experiencing. And a lot of times what individuals can do when we experience stress is we just kind of tend to shove all the emotions under the rug, but eventually the rug becomes a big hill and you can't walk over it. And so we want to think about ways that we are managing our emotions day to day, week to week, so that we can be resilient and stay in that upstairs brain arena. So when we are regulated, we are able to do these self-regulation activities. And this helps us, again, in our personal and our work relationships. So when we are practicing self-regulation, we're able to identify and manage our emotions. And you've heard me say this over and over, but it's really a key point in self-regulation. Emotions can very easily take over because a lot of times those intense emotions are housed in that downstairs brain, and our downstairs brain can be quite strong. So it's really the ability to manage them. And also is what allows us to match our arousal and energy to fit the situation. So when you're self-regulated, you're able to be in your workplace and move um, to the situation that's around you. You're kind of able to excite yourself to meet the kind of energy that's needed for that situation. And you're also able to regulate yourself back down so your energy level is fitting. So it's the ability to move from one patient's room where you might be attending to something that is high stress to the next patient's room where you're maybe needing to provide some information that is could be potentially scary for a patient. And so it's that ability to move from one to the next. Then we have the self-regulation is this ability to concentrate and shift your attention from one thing to the next. So we have several tasks that we have to do in the workplace, and it's that really ability to be flexible and move from one situation to the other, to also kind of concentrate on one task, knowing that you have other tasks that you need to do. It's also this ability to engage in social interactions appropriately. And sometimes what happens when we're not self-regulated is we tend to withdraw or isolate ourselves. And that's not helpful. Again, an important piece of resilience is being able to engage socially. And so when we're regulated, we're able to do that. And then it's also the ability to empathize with others. And so when we are in a state of stress, it's very hard to provide compassion and to empathize with the individuals around us, which can end up impacting our work with our patients and our clients. And so staying in a regulated space allows us to practice that clinical piece, which is so helpful when we're working with patients. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Shannon, who's going to talk more about kind of what this growth mindset is and that framework.
So as Kira's talked about, we really need to be able to promote resiliency in ourselves and in the workplace. And one core strategy to do that is by practicing a growth mindset. So a growth mindset is really this underlying belief that individuals have about learning and intelligence. And it's the idea that someone believes that extra time, extra energy, and extra effort will lead to higher achievement. So growth mindsets are kind of your motivational information, your achievement, and it's important to tie this back to our learning brain. By being in a growth mindset, we're in our upstairs brain, and that makes our upstairs brain feel happy because it's learning and growing and stretching. It's easier to kind of understand a growth mindset when we look at it compared to its opposite of a fixed mindset. So again, that growth mindset is where an individual believes that we are constant works in progress. We need to always be continually working to improve ourselves. Individuals who have a growth mindset like to pursue new challenges. They view those challenges as an opportunity instead of a threat. They embrace learning new information. They really persist through those challenging activities to achieve new goals. And they're inspired when they're presented with change and with new things. That's opposite to someone who might have a fixed mindset, which is where the individual believes that everyone kind of has a cap at the end of the day and that their abilities or their talents are limited. They're going to reach a certain place in their life, and that is where they will always remain. Individuals with that fixed mindset really avoid challenge. They tend to prefer to really show more about what they already know rather than showing that they might not know something. They may give up easily when presented with change or new information, and they're very threatened by new information or by change. So, as you can kind of begin to hear, individuals with a fixed mindset really feel like they can't grow and learn, whereas a growth mindset is the ability to really navigate through challenges, which ties back to our resiliency. So, if we want to be able to engage our personal resilience and really increase the flexibility of our executive functioning, then these are some strategies we can start to practice to cultivate that growth mindset. It's important to know not everyone is one or the other. We're really kind of on a spectrum between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And as we experience stress, we're more likely to slip down into that fixed mindset because it is a threat and we're living more in our downstairs brain that doesn't want to deal with threats. But if we're able to practice some of these skills, we'll be able to move out of that fixed mindset and toward a growth mindset. So, this can look like actively pursuing new challenges in the workplace, or new hobbies, or new interests. Individuals who are practicing this skill of a growth mindset are persistent and they really accept responsibility for their own actions. They're able to listen to criticism. They actively seek out constructive feedback from colleagues and from other individuals. They remain really curious and they ask questions. They want to know more about why something happened or how they're being perceived. They can also continue to promote a growth mindset by focusing on kind of the process that they're going through over the results. And again, this is really a skill, just like all of our regulation and all of our resiliency. This isn't something that we're born with. So it just takes a lot of practice and continually engaging in that self management and some mindfulness exercises so that we can stay present and aware of how we're showing up in that workplace and whether we are trying to be open to new ideas or not. So, when we practice this growth mindset, we will be able to have many benefits, but we highlight four of them here for you today. And one benefit is that we engage in this continuous learning, which is so critical to the workplace and to our professional development, but it's also really critical to our personal wellness and resiliency as well. Because if we're engaging in constantly learning new information, then we're increasing our executive functioning, we're staying in our upstairs brain, and we're able to learn new skills and new knowledge. And that's going to really serve us well in the long run. But by practicing a growth mindset, we're also increasing our resilience. Because growth mindsets see change as opportunity, they are able to practice and implement their problem solving skills. They learn from failure and they learn how to navigate through difficult situations, which you heard Kira talking about when we were talking about one of our regulation skills, being able to kind of move through the challenging situation. Ultimately, when we are practicing this growth mindset, we're also able to embrace challenge and be really receptive to constructive criticism. That's going to help us in the workplace be part of the team, be part of the culture. And so we'll engage in more satisfaction in the workplace through this. And then finally, it also helps us to remain humble. Individuals who believe that they have a growth mindset feel like they're always going to be working to improve themselves. They're not fixed, they're not done yet. And so they have this kind of attitude of being grateful and being humble that there's more to learn. And what we know is that having that ability to be humble actually combats burnout and stress in the workplace and in our personal lives as well. So ultimately, we want to increase our personal wellness because if we're not compassionate to ourselves, then our work is really incomplete. We need to make sure that as helping professionals, we're taking care of ourselves, that we are modeling the resilience that we want our clients and our patients to see, and that we're practicing it as well. So then we'll discuss what some of these kind of prevention strategies might look like. So When we want to address toxic stress and burnout and compassion fatigue, when we're in our downstairs brain too much, we know that one of the best things to do is try to prevent us from getting there. So this starts with acknowledging that the work that we do can be stressful, that we are in a helping profession where there is an occupational hazard of experiencing toxic stress. And so we need to be able to acknowledge those signs and those symptoms that we're experiencing that within ourselves, that we might be in that downstairs brain and not able to utilize our executive functioning well. If we are able to acknowledge it, then we need to develop plans and resources to be able to help ourselves when we are experiencing the stress. We also, within that plan, need to have management techniques where we are staying aware of our basic bodily functions. We're taking care of those basic needs like sleeping and eating and exercising well, and being very attuned and aware of how we're feeling. And this again ties back to that resilience, because part of our resiliency is being able to identify what we're feeling, where we're feeling it, so that we can be able to address it. And then through prevention, we also want to engage in self-soothing techniques where we're practicing the ability to regulate ourselves back down. We're practicing some of the emotional regulation and all of the resiliency strategies that we looked at earlier. When we are engaging in all of this, we are able to create this idea of work-life resilience. Many people have probably heard more of the work-life balance concept, and we've moved away from work-life balance because ultimately we recognize life is never going to be a nice, even scale that's all balanced out. That'd be wonderful, but that's not how life works. We are going to have times and periods of increased stress in one part of our life or increased stress in another. We're going to have times and periods where things are going really well at work, but not so well at home. And we need to be able to move through that. And so instead of talking about work-life balance, where they're equal, we promote the idea of resiliency, because again, resiliency is moving through and navigating through those stressful situations. A framework for looking at work-life resiliency is the idea of knowing when to lean in and to lean out. So there will be times where work will need to take more of the priority, and we need to lean into our work life and put extra time and energy there. And that might mean that for a little bit, we're leaning out of our personal life and out of some of our family and our friendship context. But we recognize that it's not going to stay that way forever. And that over time, as we resolve and navigate through the challenges at work, then we can move back into leaning more into family. Or maybe family needs your extra time and attention right now, and we pull back a little bit from the workplace. As you can imagine, being able to have work-life resilience requires having very clear boundaries and being able to set clear boundaries about when do I need to lean in, when do I need to lean out. And if I am maybe leaning in at work, who can help pick up the slack at home, and vice versa in the workplace? And being very clear about that with those in our kind of supportive environment so that they understand where those boundaries are, and we're very clear about our limits. Which leads ultimately to the third part of our work-life resilience framework, where clear is kind. And here we mean being very clear about what our boundaries are, where our priorities are right now, and not leaving it to understanding, saying, right now, this is what's going on, and I need to really focus my energy here. And when this is resolved, I will come over and focus more energy on this side of things. And that by being clear about our boundaries and about when we're leaning in and when we're leaning out, we're promoting resiliency, we're modeling it, and we're helping others understand where we are at, which is part of that clear communication, which was a resiliency strategy. So finally, at the end of the day, by practicing personal resilience, we are creating our own self-care, and we are addressing all parts of who we are. So within self-care and within practicing resiliency, we want to make sure that we are taking time to address all 6 parts of our self-care wheel here. So first, this starts with psychological, and this is really kind of our learning space, and it's where we're going to be managing our cognitions, making sure that we're taking care of our mental energy. We also need to make sure that we're addressing our emotional space when we practice resiliency, being aware of those feelings, aware of times when we're experiencing more stress so that we can build up and address wherever we're experiencing that stress. Part of self-care also includes managing our spiritual selves. And for some, this might look like religion, but for others, it could look like the sense of just being part of the greater world and the greater good, and maybe enjoying some time in nature and just taking moments to understand and be grateful for where you are. We also need to practice personal care. Again, this gets back to kind of our self-management of ourselves. Self-care also looks at professionally what we are doing in the workplace to help ensure that we are staying compassionate in our work and that we're satisfied and engaged well in the work that we are doing and able to take that growth mindset and really apply it to the workplace. And then finally, it's our physical self as well. And this, of course, is eating well, sleeping well, exercising, and doing the things we need to do to make sure that our physical body remains healthy and resilient as well. So at the end of the day, when we practice within all of these 6 realms, we're able to kind of start to create our work-life resilience. And then here we have just some of our references where you can go to learn more about resiliency, toxic stress, growth mindset, and self-care. So thank you for joining us today about personal resilience.